Hello everyone and welcome to the Speak Freely podcast. My name's Emma Dunwell, but before we get into today's episode, I'd just like to say you may notice that we're in a new studio. Hopefully the next few episodes will be recorded from here and hopefully E Speaks Freely is going onwards and upwards in the world. So let's get to today's episode. Today we have someone who has come on before. We have the leader of the English Constitution Party, Graham Moore. So first off, how are you today, Graham?
I'm very well, thank you, and I'm really pleased you've invited me back on.
Well, the first time I interviewed you, it was via Zoom, so it's nice to actually be able to sit down with you and have you in the studio.
Yeah, no, it's lovely.
So at the moment, there is this big thing going on with the election, or possibly fraudulent election, for the Runcorn and Helsby by-election. So first off, before we get into the legal proceedings and how that's all going, could you just give anyone a rundown who might not know about what's gone on?
So, Runcorn and Helsby, there was a by-election. The specific reason for the by-election is because the Labour candidate attacked a constituent, was convicted, then went for appeal and got out in 2 days, right? Which is it's not really the point of the election, but it's just frustrating that there's one rule for them and one rule for us. So there was a by-election in which we campaigned very well. We had a lot of support there. We had a lot of podcasters supporting us as well. One of them, which was Sean Atwood, which he was a local person to Runcorn and Helsby. And during that election, we received a lot of problems from the police. So they intimidated our campaign. Our leaflets were not delivered by the Royal Mail, even though we had paid £830 for the leaflets. There was a particular message on them leaflets, which was about the Criminal Justice Act 1988, Section 134, torture, which is to do with the rape and torture gangs. Just to make sure everyone's aware, no one should be calling these people groomers, right? It's rape and torture of English children. And the acquiescence of the state. So all of that was on the leaflet, and the Royal Mail didn't deliver them. I complained prior to the election, but when we got to the actual election itself, I got exactly 50 votes. And then people, especially the mainstream media, were saying, sore loser, come last, 50 votes. And then I said, hang on a minute. I got exactly 50 votes when I run in Tooting, when Sadiq Khan stood down because he'd become the mayor of London. And it is statistically impossible for the same candidate to get exactly 50 votes, 9 years apart, in 2 separate demographics, one up north, one in London. And we then looked at the votes themselves. There was only 6 votes in it between Labour, who basically were the incumbent in the area, and Reform UK, Sarah Pouchin. So initially I didn't believe there was anything wrong with Sarah Pouchin, and I didn't believe that she had interfered with the election in any way, but she had to be a respondent by law. I considered she wasn't respondent by deed.
Sorry, what would be the difference in that? You just clarify what that means. So she would have basically, does that mean she would have known about it, but she wouldn't have necessarily been directly involved if it had been fraudulent? So
with Sarah Pouchin, I believed, so this is basically the fraud, right? And it's happened before. I witnessed it in Batley and Spen. What actually happened, they declared a bundle recount. What does that mean? It means they don't look at the individual. So if you get a bundle of votes like that, they don't look at the votes inside the bundle. They telecount the bundle, check that it's got 1,500 in it, and then put it back in the same pile it come from. For example, Labour. The fraud is, and they've done this at Doncaster in 2009 and got caught doing it. The Labour Party took another party's votes, which happened to be the British National Party, which is an oxymoron, but I won't go into that. But they took the British National Party's votes, and they put a Labour Party vote on the top and a Labour Party vote on the bottom, and then they took that as 100 votes or 50 votes for the Labour Party and put it in the Labour Party's bundle and count. What people don't realise is in that particular election, 5,000 votes were stolen from the BNP and put into the Labour pile, right? So if you and I've seen this happen, the same thing happened to George Galloway in Batley and Spen, and I witnessed that, right? But I was a count agent, I wasn't a candidate, and therefore it's not for me by law to bring an election petition. The difference in Runcorn and Helsby, which is what I explained to the High Court, is I am a candidate.
Yeah.
There are too many things that have gone on with it to make this a fair election. So I've asked the High Court via election petition to void the election or to order a full individual ballot recount at an off-site location, so not the same location. So that's really what it's about. And Ashby versus White 1703, which is English constitutional law, basically said you are governed by consent. If your ballot is interfered with by anyone whatsoever, that is a constitutional right violation, and therefore you have a remedy. And the remedy is an election petition, and to explain it to 2 High Court judges. And that's what happened. But prior to that, without getting into the detail, we will get into the detail and I'll explain it. So I didn't believe that Sarah Pouchin did anything wrong. I believe that the Labour Party had stolen all of the, not all, but some of the votes from other candidates and pushed them into the Labour pile, but they didn't do it enough because they still lost by 6 votes. And if they checked every single vote and redid the count, what you would find is Labour lost by a lot more. And we campaigned in the area. We had hundreds of people out on 3 occasions campaigning with us, all from the local area. The support for us was well in excess of 50 votes. So that's what we actually put to the High Court. But there is more of a story behind the actual court appearances.
So before we get into that, because I really want to delve deep into this. But so far, how are the court proceedings going? Are you feeling hopeful? Are things going in your favour?
Let me put it this way. Certain legal professionals, barristers and solicitors of some standing have started to refer to me as the King Counsel Killer.
Oh, wow.
Because on every occasion I have won against an army of, 2 King's Counsels, an army of barristers and an army of solicitors. They've taken me through 2 different High Court proceedings in which I have won the arguments, the legal arguments, at the High Court. And then the Appellant Court, which is the second highest court in the country. And all 3 appellant judges agreed with me and actually said that you need to pay Mr. Moore's costs for this appellant hearing. The appellant hearing should never have happened. They did it as a delaying tactic, in my opinion, in other words, an abusive process, because they needed to knock out our 2 original judges. There's a rota system with the petitions. And the judges were coming to the end of the rota period, right, which is a year. So the original hearing in Runcorn and Helsby was due to be heard on the 2nd of October. The rota finishes in October. They pulled in an appellant hearing, which, by the way, can take a year to get an appeal through. They did it in a week.
Wow.
Right? So, and because of that, we then got a change of judges. And all of the other arguments we put forward, hadn't been heard by the new two judges. There's no discredit to the two new judges. I believe that was designed by the King's Counsel that we've been up against.
So you're feeling pretty confident. I mean, I certainly wouldn't want to be on your opposing side legally.
Well, I've got to be honest with you. So we've gone all over their hurdles. The hearing, which was a 3-day trial in Runcorn and Helsby, so 2 High Court judges travel from London to Chester Crown Court. We was in the number 1 court in Chester. It's a beautiful court, 2 High Court judges in front of me, all the wigs. It's a very old Victorian Crown Court. 65 people, and many waiting outside was in the public gallery. There was one member of the press in the media gallery who then misreported on the case. But all I can say is the judges were very impressed. So a 3-day trial in which I cross-examined certain witnesses, we called our witnesses, and I was prosecuting the returning officer and technically Sarah Pouchin for a fraudulent election. So
if you win, what will be the outcome? Will they do a recount? Will they completely redo the election altogether? What do you think, what would happen?
They can do either or both.
Which would be the preferable outcome?
I'll be honest, the preferable outcome would be an individual ballot recount at an off-site location, and both judges mentioned at the end of the trial that they could order all of the ballots to be removed from Houghton Borough Council and taken to the Royal Courts of Justice and counted at the Royal Courts of Justice. And I said, I trust judges and I trust you to count those ballots.
Yeah.
And they both said, thank you.
And what have been the counter-arguments so far? What have been the defences?
The counter-argument from the returning officer was that it's impossible to defraud the count. My argument is, once you say something is impossible, you don't look for the fraud. You become complacent. One of the things that come up during this trial, and people will like this, is I actually stated that the Fabian Society are involved with the training of the counters.
Yeah.
Right. So one thing you have to bear in mind, it was Stalin that said it's not who you vote for that matters, it's who counts the votes. Right. And the Marxist Fabian Society, Common Purpose, have took that to the 9th degree. Yeah. They actually get their people in there and they call them in and they know exactly how this fraud operates. So the person who was in the witness box, I asked a question, who trains these people? And she said, oh, they come from different places. So I said, are you telling me that all of these people are Houghton Borough Council employees, or are you saying they are external? And she then said, they are external as well as local. So where do they come from?
Yeah. She
said Liverpool, St Helens, and all of these other red wall, what they call the red wall states, right? So, or the red wall counties and constituencies. That means that there were people there, and I said this to her on the stand, that you don't know. How can you understand that their integrity? How can you understand that they're honest people if you don't even know them, but they've come in to count the ballots? And she said, look, they have to sign a declaration. And I was like, wow, that's it.
Yeah, I was going to say, is that
right?
it?
So the judges are listening to this, right? So the judges previously didn't know that the counters at these elections are not part of the local council. Some of them are, but they're brought in from different areas.
But they weren't aware?
No. The judges, this is the first time ever that this fraud has been put to 2 High Court judges. It's known about, but no one's ever jumped every barrier to get in front of 2 High Court judges except us.
Well, I was going to ask, if all the counters of the ballots, the way it's sounding, if the majority of them are corrupt, then how widespread is this issue? Are we just talking about Runcorn and Helsby because, quite frankly, you've had the balls to stand up and do it? Whereas, if we really looked into it, are we looking at almost every local election, by-election is probably fraudulent?
Well, exactly. And part of my petition was to say that this is systemic.
Yeah.
This is systemic fraud. We live in a democratic nation where our vote counts. It is not for a returning officer or his training agencies or his policy agency, for example, the Fabian Society, who are Marxists, to appoint a Member of Parliament. A Member of Parliament stands for us and we elect them, right? Judges absolutely got it. So what the judges said is one of the things that we are looking at is the systemic. You have said systemic. We are looking at the systemic nature of this, as you describe, as a fraud. So the returning officer was saying, if there is a problem, it's an error. I kept saying this is conspiracy to defraud the public, and that man is a conspirator in that fraud. So blatantly calling him out as a fraudster. Don't forget he's on £200,000 a year, right? Plus 2/3 pension. So just to give you an example, the CEO of Croydon Council in South London, she was on just under £950,000 a year. So is there something there that would encourage them to commit fraud?
I would think so. 950 grand a year, that's a joke. And so that was the defence was that it was an error and it wasn't.
So they're saying there was no error, but if there was a problem, it's an error.
It was because of an error. It wasn't for anything intentional.
The error, where I was saying this is criminal.
Yeah.
And what I said to the judges is quite simple. I said these people it is organised political crime. That is what we're talking about. They know exactly what they're doing and how to do it. And the judges were listening intently. At one stage, Sarah Pouchins, barrister, stood up and said to me, Mr. Moore, his name was Adam Richardson, Mr. Moore, you've mentioned the Fabian Society. Are you a conspiracist?
Well, so I suppose you had that question coming, didn't you? These days.
Again, so I'm in the witness box. I've got two High Court judges to my left. And I've looked at them and then looked at him and said, let's talk about the Fabian Society. And then I said, are you aware that they have just announced that 141 of their members of Parliament were elected because of what they was doing? Their policies got them elected. They're declaring to everyone as committed Marxists that they're there. And then I explained to the court, and I've just got to say this, don't forget the gallery's packed. The judges have already said there is massive public interest in this case, even though the media are not covering it.
I was going to say, I've hardly seen any mainstream coverage.
Hardly anything at all. And if they did mention it, they misreported it. But the crucial part of this, when we talked about the Fabian Society, I said that the 141 of them just been elected. Keir Starmer is an executive member of the Fabian Society. All of his cabinet are Fabian Society members. Sadiq Khan is an executive member of the Fabian Society, right? I said, so you're calling it a conspiracy theory, right? They're Marxists, they're committed Marxists, they hate England, right? It's on their website. There is no mention of England anywhere, right? They hate England. Karl Marx hated England, right? In fact, Eccles, not Marx, but Eccles said in a letter, every communist revolution has been shipwrecked on the rock of England. Right? They hate England with a passion, right? Not Britain, England, mainly because of the common law. So getting back to the actual trial and the judges, I explained all of this. And then I said to the court and to the judges, the last time we had a Fabian Society cabinet, you sent this country to war on a lie, right? And now we've got it again. A Fabian cabinet, and you're about to send us to war again. We are protecting our children and our grandchildren from these people, right? And when I stopped the explanation, don't forget this is all in reference to Adam Richardson, retained by Reform UK's question on me being a conspiracy theorist.
Yeah.
The public gallery erupted in simultaneous applause, right? And as I looked, even one of the ushers was clapping, right? And the judge then said, this is not a place for you to be on your soapbox. And the other judge said, but we understand the passion from the gallery, right? So they had listened, and then they see this spontaneous applause because I was telling the truth.
And it's not something you particularly see in the courtroom either, just to add, because everyone's usually, everyone's very reserved, everyone's very quiet. So to have the room just kind of erupt into applause must have been quite the rare occasion.
Oh, very much so. I've never seen it before. And just so getting back to the previous case at the appellant court, 90 people turned up to watch that. The appellant court judges opened a second court and put everyone in that court and our court, and then connected the courts via video so everyone could see. And they said justice needs to be seen to be done, right? So the appellant court judges were fantastic, and they accommodated everyone. Don't forget, a lot of our members are blind, deaf, disabled, retirees. I don't like calling them pensioners, because pensioners has the implication that they're now taking from the state. They've worked all their lives.
Well,
they're retirees.
Pensioners implies that they're being looked after by their country, and now we know that is just not the case anymore. So
No,
maybe you're right.
So I mean, getting back to the trial itself, and there is more to it, but the judges were listening intently. Are they likely to rule in our favour? We've already made law in the other case, right, which people don't understand. It is now massively in our favour to bring election petitions, all because of what we've done and what I've done, right? Our case will be cited in 100 years' time, because it is come from the appellant court. Yeah. So it is the law of the land. As opposed to some of these people that go in front of judges. All of the judges I've come across have thanked me for being so respectful, not only to the court but to them, and for making my answers and what I present as law and the authorities I rely on so clear to them. Yeah. Many of them don't know. I mean, many of them have not heard these arguments before. Yeah. And all of a sudden they're hearing the argument from a normal litigant in person, whatever you want to describe me as. But the point is, I've read law for 30 years. Yeah. So when I start to present the arguments, they listen, which is the main thing.
Well, I mean, it sounds like it was amazing. I interviewed you. Was that the day when you said, everyone got up and applauded when you were speaking about the Fabian Society? Was that the day where I then bumped into you outside?
That was the appellant
Right,
court.
okay.
And again, so I didn't, once I'd come out that court and did the interview with you, I didn't know, every time we've had a reserved judgment, that the hearing that we've just had is a reserved judgment. That means that they're looking and going through the evidence, and then because they're about to make law, they're very careful in what they write in their judgment. Yeah. So the appellant court, it took just over, because it needed to come out quick, just over a week before they give their answer. The previous hearing, with 2 hearings, which I won, partly, that they knocked out the Royal Mail and the police, and I had to pay £25,000 costs. But the point being that the High Court judges looked at the Royal Mail's costs and called them grossly inflated. Wow. And basically took their costs down from £80,000 to £12,500, and then the police costs were £12,500. So we had to pay that by crowdfunding. Now, I don't earn any money out of it. But for the level of expertise I've got in the Constitution, people would be paying hundreds of thousands of pounds. The only one who ever comes close to me, and I'd still, in my opinion, beat him in any high court, is someone called Sir James Eadie, who is a King's Counsel, and they regard him as a constitutional expert. Most of the barristers I know and solicitors have said to me, you would not only give him a run for his money, you'd probably win. Because he sees the Constitution in a different light to me. I see it from our point.
Maybe we could try and set something up.
Yeah.
But just getting back to I suppose, the finer details in between the lines of what's going on at the moment with the legal proceedings, has there been any disclosure orders, or will there be any disclosure orders? Because if they are saying that, there was no problem, but if there is a problem, it will be just an error, is there going to be any forcing of like, okay, well, let's see proof of that?
So there's two different elements to the question. It's a good question, by the way. Two different elements to what you've just asked. So the first thing is, the Royal Mail, I received an anonymous letter from a whistleblower giving me the names of two senior managers that had hidden our leaflets in a depot.
Oh.
I brought that up at court, showed them the letter, showed the judges the letter, and they said, there's nothing we can do about this unless you want us to adjourn. And I said, I'm just making a point on record that I have received this information. They have named two individuals as senior managers in Runcorn's depot as hiding our leaflets and not delivering them. That is a criminal offence, and it is also an offence and against the election. Right, so I made sure all of that was on record. I've also said is, as a material fact, the Royal Mail never disclosed that, and therefore it is contempt of court.
Yeah. Right.
So that's all on record. That's about disclosure as such. What you're actually referring to is if they believe something has happened, will there be disclosure? The disclosure, in effect, is the judgment. If the judgment is that we believe there needs to be an individual ballot recount off-site, that is disclosure. That means the judges believe there is enough evidence in probability, because this is just about probability. This is not the criminal standard. This is the civil standard of law. And the fact that 50 votes 9 years ago in Tooting and for the same candidate and 50 votes, exactly 50 votes again, it's never ever happened in political history. And don't forget, we record all of our elections. It's impossible. It's 1 million elections to one.
Really?
Right? So if an election is every 4 years, I'm talking about parliamentary elections. If an election is every 4 years, for example, or the odd by-election, it would take you 1 million elections before you got that result, which is statistically impossible because I'd be dead, right? And that is what the judges are looking at. And the second issue is the closeness of the count. So only 6 votes in it. In other election petitions, Sir Richard Morey, is now King's Counsel. I'm not sure if he's passed away. He was a great election judge, highly intelligent, very, very honest, huge amount of integrity. And the things that he said when he was an election petition judge, for example, that the UK's elections are so corrupt, it would make a banana republic blush. Right, and that's a judge who said that, right? So you have to understand what's going on here. So one of the things that Richard Morris said in other cases was, I'm surprised that the Labour Party didn't bring the election petition. Why is it another candidate? It's always so. If you imagine in Runcorn and Helsby, the two candidates that were 6 votes apart was Reform UK. Yeah. And the Labour Party. The Labour Party lost. With 6 votes in it, you would expect them to bring an election petition,
Yeah.
right? But they didn't. Judges will take an inference from that. Why didn't they? Because it would show their cheating. It would show that the Labour Party stacked the votes from other candidates in their pile. They're not going to bring that petition.
So hang on, if there's multiple parties then that could have, been acting fraudulently in that by-election, then how can we really zone in on where the problem is coming from? Because, I mean, there's been problems with the depots, with people not delivering election materials and leaflets, things like that. You mentioned police harassment, people actually harassing and doing random stops and searches on campaigners. Then there's the actual miscount itself. In terms of corruption, it seems like an infestation. The only thing that I can think of that would solve that is literally by firing everyone and hiring like a whole new enclave of people. But obviously that can't be done. So
well, it can be.
Oh,
I can tell you how. I can tell you how to do it. But so the Royal Mail is controlled by the unions.
Yeah.
Right. And previously in 2019, the Royal Mail actually took the Communication Workers Union to the High Court because they was going to not deliver. They was going on strike during an election. So the Royal Mail actually took the union to court and said, you're interfering with an election. But when it was me saying it, no, we're not.
Yeah,
right?
funny
so
that.
They're not two-faced. It's just one rule for them, one rule for us. On the other side of it, the police, so there was no stop and search problems or anything like that. What they'd done is they harassed by sending me emails demanding to know where we was going to be, how many people were going to be there on our days of action when we was going out with our boards and delivering and leafleting, etc. They didn't do that to any other political party, just us. Yeah. And the only reason they honed in on us is because we had English in our name, right? The police now, prior to 2008, they had to have 2 years probation. You wasn't allowed to have access to the public for 2 years while on probation. You had to pass a constitutional exam. That's all gone, right? So now what they're doing is they take you with 6 weeks training and foreigners as well. And I'm not talking about black, brown, I'm talking about Polish people, German people.
Was it anywhere where there might be a language barrier?
Yeah, they can just join the police. Well, our constitution forbids that, right? Well, it did forbid it, and until Clement Attlee, a Fabian in 1948, removed it from the English constitution. Right, because he created something called the British Nationality Act. At Schedule 4, it removed the Act of Settlement and the part that protected us from foreigners being in control of the English. Right. So once people understand what's gone on, don't forget we've reverse engineered everything the Marxists put in place to destroy England. But the British, or those who call themselves British, they don't understand. They've been brainwashed to believe something that is untrue. So getting back to this situation, you've rightly said how corrupt are the elections. Well, corruption doesn't solve corruption. The rule of law does. Yeah. But you've got to have judges that are willing to accept there is something seriously wrong. Richard did accept that, Richard Morey. These judges seem to be leaning towards us. The other two judges definitely did, and I could tell you stories about both of them in their past experience. The major point is, and this is major, there is no such thing as a red wall in the north of England, or indeed in London. It is a lie. They have been cheating all along. So the people want to elect people that represent them. The Labour Party, particularly the Fabian Society and another group called Common Purpose, have trained and infiltrated the count teams and appoint who they want appointed as a Member of Parliament. It's completely unconstitutional. But there is no red wall. You're up against officials cheating.
Just to interrupt for 2 seconds, everyone, I would like to remind you all that clean skincare should never mean compromise. We've all trusted big skincare brands for far too long. Most of them are tied to Big Pharma, and the ingredients on the back of the pack are so long and complicated that you can't even pronounce them, let alone know what they really are and what they're doing to you. Which is why I'm so proud to tell you guys about our new sponsor, Forticare. Forticare is a completely British-made tallow skincare line dedicated to keeping things natural. They have multiple choices for scents of face and body moisturisers, as well as a completely natural sun cream. And if you go on their website and use the code SPEAKFREELY, you can get 20% off your first order. So essentially what I'm understanding is it's sort of similar to how, you know, all these different brands and all these different companies, the further you go up, they're all actually owned by the same company. We have, you know, Vanguard and BlackRock and all these things. And you always think that Nike and Adidas are competitors, but it's all owned by the same company and things like that. Are we seeing the same thing with politicians, MPs, councillors, and voting systems?
You have asked a fantastic question, because what you're actually referring to is the uni party.
Right.
This is the bit that will shock people. The Fabian Society have members in the Conservative and Union Party, even though they're Marxists, in the Liberal Democrats, who are neither Liberal or Democratic, and they have members in the Labour Party, right? There's factions in the Labour Party. People often ask me, what do you think of Jeremy Corbyn? I've met Jeremy Corbyn. As a person, I quite like him. It's the same as George Galloway, right? But I am not their comrade, right? I do not believe in communism. Communists slaughtered 70 million Christians in the USSR, and their weapon of choice was famine, right? And torture. So when people understand what's actually going on in the background, the Fabian Marxists have actually got control, and they've had control for the best part at least of 100 years. Right, so like I say, we've reverse engineered everything that they've done, and we can work out, and we've worked out how to put it back. Comment you made earlier, do we need to sack them all? I can give you the easiest solution. That's avoid the Acts of Union. They lose their power completely. They've gone. England goes back to being England, managed by counties and shires again, and then we remove them. The Helsby's Laws of England states at paragraph 1310 that fascists and communists must be purged from our system, right? And when I have people on the left call me a fascist, and then fascists call me a communist, and I always say to them, I'm neither. I'm an Englishman, right? And the English Constitution does not allow authoritarian government. That's why the English fought against the Nazis, and that's why we would have fought against the communists. But the communists won the Second World War, basically. And the infiltration from then on speeded up the process. So again, getting back to your, in effect, a uni party does exist. But what people don't realise is that the Conservative and Union Party, there are Fabians, MPs, within the Conservative Union Party. I will guarantee there are Fabians in Reform. There are Fabians in Advance UK. I mean, Ben Habib, there's things that he's said, and I've just said people are following the wrong people, right? Because
so you have your suspicions about Habib as well, then? In the Fabian
anyone
Society?
who describes themselves as a British Pakistani, and again, I'm talking about people are talking about nothing to do with his colour. I'm not interested in people's colour of their skin. The English were the people, not the British, the English were the ones who stopped slavery. Somerset versus Stuart, 1772. It was not the British. It took Wilberforce 20 consecutive years to get the Abolition Act through that British Parliament. We'd already stopped it. We'd already said in common law, it's unlawful. You cannot be a slave in England. And that's why blacks come from the Caribbean, right, to get to us, not Scotland, not Holland, not France, England, because as soon as their feet touched our soil, they were no longer slaves, right? So people don't realise that is English common law. That's the English law that saved them, right? The point I'm getting at with all of this is these people don't realise it's an attack on England. And then people who refer to themselves as British, that British Nationality Act of 1948 and a special Schedule 4 and the British Nationality Act of 1981 is why you can't put on a form English, right? Or Welsh or Scottish or Northern Irish, right? So when you look at that, who was the last person who did that? Joseph Stalin. When he was the Commissar of Identity in the USSR, he told everyone, you are a Soviet, right? The British have done the same thing to us, right? So people now are seeing the English flag rising, and all I say to people is do not raise the British flag. You don't understand what it is. It is the flag of the enemy. And by supporting that flag, you are supporting the enemy who are now crucifying our next generations. By the time I pop my clogs, if we don't do something, right, the younger generation and their children will be slaves in a form of the British Soviet Union.
Wow. So when people call us all conspiracy theorists for saying that there is a wider agenda at play and that there is certain goals set out and that to a certain extent your votes don't count, clearly as we've seen especially with this election, the votes haven't counted. I mean, how do you respond to that? I think it might not have been, but was it Candace Owens that said the difference between a conspiracy theory and the truth is about 6 months?
Yeah.
So how do you feel about people that still kind of just refuse to see that there is corruption within the government from a local to an elite level?
It's frustrating.
Yeah, That's what I'm asking.
I've learned to contain my anger and understand that certain individuals, and particularly members of Parliament, are low IQ. Right? It sounds like it's a nasty thing to say. It's not, right? To be self-educated, not from a university, anyone who comes out of university, they're basically the intelligentsia that they used to have in France, right? So I don't particularly like people who've gone through university, and especially political degrees. So I was in a pub the other day, and a conversation come up about immigration, and it was my local pub in Devon. So I had to bite my lip and try and keep my mouth shut, right? And I sat there, and there was a guy that had come from London that was very posh, talking at the bar, right? But there's some proper Devon people in there, and Devon working class, just like I am. And one of these young guys started having a go about the boats.
All right.
And then this intelligentsia, a posh person from London, West London, right, then turned around and said, these people coming in dinghies, they're putting their lives at risk in the boats and all that, right? And I'm still biting my tongue. And yet this young fella in the pub said they're criminals. That's the only reason they're in the boat. Anyone else would have got a plane for 20 quid from Paris into London, but they can't because they wouldn't be allowed in the country.
Yeah.
And this guy, the reason I'm bringing this up is because this guy who was repeating the propaganda from the ITV, BBC, etc. And then I finally butted in and I said, not only is this guy right, the young fella, right, but you are repeating the propaganda of the enemy, right? And everyone went quiet in the pub, right? Because I don't say much in there, right? And I said, collaborators were dealt with at the end of the Second World War. For you to repeat their propaganda and expose yourself as an intelligentsia, right, you will be dealt with. Do you understand that? Collaboration is you are a traitor. And once it all went quiet and someone else said something, and I said, listen, I'm staying out of the argument, but what I'm pleased about is I've come out here and I'm seeing someone with a Devon accent, right, a Devon working class man can see what they've done to London, see what they've done to Yorkshire, see what they've done to Hull, right, see what they've done all over this country, and now they're understanding they have to protect their own communities, and that's what they're doing, right? So from that point of view, I was pleasantly surprised.
Yeah.
That younger people was getting it in a bigger way. And again, I was asked in a pub, are you a racist?
Yeah.
And I said, yeah, I am. And I'm proud of it.
What,
and
just to shut them up, or?
She's only young. No, it was quite funny. And she went, you're not a racist. I'm not a racist. And I said, the point I'm trying to get at with you, right, is what people say about racism now, I'm actually a patriot. So when they call me a racist, they're actually saying you're a patriot. And I say, yeah, I am. And I'm proud of it, right? Yeah. It wasn't me who changed the wording. It's a bit like gay.
Yeah.
And I just say, if you've changed the meaning of the word, it ain't my problem. So it's your problem.
Yeah, no, I mean, just getting on to what you mentioned about like people being traitorous to the country and repeating kind of like opposition propaganda. Would you be in favour of bringing back exile? Because we have the main thing on everyone's tongues at the moment is, deportations. The disagreements is just, okay, we want deportations, but how many? Labour wants to do this one in, one out. Reform are a bit tougher. Then there are some more fringe parties, like UKIP that, saying, we deport them all and everything. I'm concerned about deportations, but the more I'm seeing the splitting up politically of British people and English people, the more I think about, okay, the next thing is people are going to start advocating for exile. So would that be something that you think would be called for to deal with a traitor to England, so to speak?
You've hit another good question. From history, the Soviet Union no longer exists. From 1991, they did the same thing as what I'm proposing with the British, right? So they pulled the plug on the British statutory union. There's a difference between the common law union and the statutory union. Does the same thing. It unplugs it, the same as what they did in the Soviet Union. 20% of the population of the USSR still call themselves Soviet. Right, they were brainwashed over 70 years to believe they were Soviet. You don't really need to do that. But what they did in the Soviet Union was they purged. Remember what the Helsby laws of England say. They purged all of the Soviet judges.
Right.
And they then said, we now need to enforce the Russian constitution. That is what I recommend for us, right? Getting back to immigration, there's a couple of things that you need to understand, really. There's a simple way of dealing with all this, right? And it is simple, and it comes from our history. It's not the first time it's happened, right? They just don't talk about it. Yeah. I'm the only person who talks about it. Those who talk about re-immigration of everyone, I understand why they're doing it. I understand their frustration, right? I'm not what's described as an ethno-nationalist.
Yeah.
But there are plenty of people in London and around the country who are black and brown and are quite clearly taking advantage of what I would have described as our good nature under the common law and a Christian nation, right? Quite clearly taking advantage of that. Not understanding when the English finally snap, right, we will show no mercy, right? So how do you deal with that? There is a particular individual, and I'm not going to name him, who's got a 7-point plan, and he basically wants to deport everyone. If you're not white, you ain't allowed to be here, right?
Full on ethno-nationalism.
Yeah. But he's uneducated. He doesn't understand that this problem has happened before. In 1708, there was a massive debate in Parliament about it in the late 1600s, and they stopped. They was basically allowing Protestants to come in from all over Europe, right? So it's got nothing to do with race. They were white people, but they had a different culture to us. Yeah. And in 1708, they signed a law into operation that allowed all these people to come in. It was something like the Protestant Act, and it allowed these people in. 3 years later, Queen Anne stepped in and abolished the Act and sent them all back home, right? And removed their British citizenship and said, you are changing the culture of England and it is not to be tolerated because you are now affecting the rights of the English that we have fought for thousands of years, right? So Queen Anne stepped in and done all this, right? This is so important to our history because these lemons don't understand their history, don't understand legal history. So it's nothing to do with race why we did that, because they was white people changing our culture.
Yeah.
That's why I turn around and say, I don't want a Polish person being a police constable because they don't understand my culture. They don't understand. They've come from an ex-Soviet regime, right? So, and again, I'll get to, there's something else. Someone, I walked into a shop and the lady was Polish and there was a football match on. She picked up the Union flag, right, and said to me, are you supporting England, right? And I just looked at her. I said, what do I want that flag for, right? I said, I'm English, not British. And she went, it's the same. I said, where are you from? She went, Poland. I said, all right, so you're a Soviet.
Oh, yeah.
And then she went, I see what you mean. I'm sorry, right? I said, good, right? Now you get it, right? So these people who go out to Poland and start saying about Poland and all that, I said, that's right. But you won't get any of them on their marches waving the Soviet flag, which is exactly what you're doing here. The equivalent to the Soviet flag is the British flag because it's what's known as a unitary state, not a country. Right. So getting back to, I think, what the original question was, how do you solve all this? The simplest way to do it immediately is to abolish, make void, the British Nationality Act of 1948 in its entirety and the British Nationality Act of 1981 in its entirety, right? Mm. Straight away, Sadiq Khan is unconstitutionally the mayor of London. Every single person in a particular authority, that means the police, that means social services, that means local councillors, none of them are allowed to be in them jobs. Right. So you remove the threat from authority straight away, right? That's not having a go at them. You're not then turning around and saying, we're going to put you on a plane and you're gone. But what it does mean, that's an immediate effect, right? You can do that almost immediately. Mm. There's further points that you can do. But when I speak to people, like, again, I hate referring to one or two people, but we've got black people in our we've got Scots, Welsh, Northern Irish, Cornish in our party, right? They believe in self-determination, but we've got black people and brown people in our party, right? We don't see them as any different to us. We regard them as English. In fact, I would say they're more English than people who regard themselves as British, right? Because they understand the Constitution. I'm like, why would you want them to go anywhere? Do you know what I mean? They understand our history. Yeah. So there's all these positives about understanding the legal history of England and the common law, which is what we gave to the world, and the Commonwealth, and understanding the difference between a dominion, an English dominion, and a British colony, right? And people don't even get the difference. And when you start talking about it, they're like, nah, I get it, right? Because we should not be seen as British internally. We was known as British externally, right? Same as Americans. But if you think about America, America was a model of England, not of Britain, but of England. And the independent states of the United States, they were independent nation states. That's why if you went to Georgia, it'd have a different legal system to Florida. Yeah. Right? So, and many other places. So once you understand all that, it's not difficult to understand. That's what I'm saying. In 2 hours in a seminar, you know, in London in particular, when I asked the question, are you British or English? At the start of the seminar in London, I think this was in Edmonton, half the audience put their hand up and said they was British and half said they was English, right? At the end of the 2 hour seminar, I asked the question again. I said, are you British? No one put their hands up. I said, or are you English? And everyone put their hands up. Yeah. There was black people there, brown people there, everyone was there. Saying we now understand, and we didn't understand it before. Now we can understand it.
Just to clarify, because I speak to a lot of people, especially when it comes to the topic of immigration, deportations, and like I mentioned a few minutes ago, we kind of, sometimes it can get a bit confusing on who thinks what, where people draw the line. So where's the line for you? For example, like you said, if we remove those aspects that would all of a sudden make Sadiq Khan void and everything like that, where is the line, let's say, if someone is third generation immigrant or if someone is fifth generation as opposed to someone who is first or second? Where is the line for you?
So don't forget what I'm talking about, a different thing. Constitutionally, the line is you have to be third generation English. You have to be born of English parents.
No.
Right? So if you're, just to give you an example, if you're a black person and your granddad and your grandmum come over here as immigrants,
Yeah.
they then had children here, right? Those children stayed here. They're both they're English. They then marry English people, same references, right? And whether they're black, white, English, brown, or whatever colour they want to be, do you know what I mean? That doesn't. The English Constitution doesn't mention race.
Yeah.
But then the next generation, so that generation still can't be a member of Parliament or have any authority, right? The next generation of them people can be, right? So we're not talking about deporting any of them, etc. If they're part of our culture,
that's it.
The most important thing for me is you say you're English. If you're not English, why do we want you here? Right? Yeah. If you're going to fight against the English and the Welsh and the Scots and the Cornish and the Northern Irish, why would we want you here? Right? And it's a big difference. Whereas you've got to try and reverse the nonsense of communist ideology. Multiculturalism don't work. But if people turn around and say, we want this, we want to be a communist, we want to be this, and say, well, go to Cuba, go to Venezuela, go to any country you want. A bit like when people say they want Sharia. So that's good. You can go to Saudi Arabia or you can go to Iran, right? Take your pick of your poison, whatever it is. People don't realise that the English Bill of Rights forbids Sharia in this country. Yeah. Right? So once you learn and you enforce your own constitution, I mean, again, referring back to, I don't like saying this because it's often the lefties, when I make reference to this, always say, oh, you got a token black mate, right? Bear in mind, most of the people I grew up with, we didn't really give a monkeys what colour he was, right? But my mate is of Jamaican descent, right? He walks around with a joint in his mouth everywhere, right? He comes from South London. If you heard him on the phone, he sounds just like me, right? He's a proper pucker geezer, and I've known him for years and years and years. If you called him British, he gets the ump.
Yeah.
He says, I'm English, right? Now, his brother is a different thing, right? His brother walks around with a limp, right? Kisses through his teeth, right? He's typical, like, Jamaican patois, right? And his brother says to him, right, and has said to him in the pub, why are you talking like that? You've never been to Jamaica in your life.
Oh, they were born here?
They was born here, yeah. They was born
I thought
here.
you meant like they'd come over from Jamaica
No.
childhood.
He was born here, but both his parents are Jamaican,
yeah.
Right? I mean, his mum's got a rich, his dad's dead, but his mum's got a really strong Jamaican accent.
Yeah.
He regards himself as English, not British.
Yeah.
Right? And that's the difference. So I would look at someone like that, right? Not just because he's my mate, but his belief is in England.
Yeah.
His belief is in the law system. His belief is we are equal, right? And I ain't got a problem with that.
Yeah.
So I'm different to ethno-nationalists. That's why ethno-nationalists don't like me.
Yeah. Well, it's always the way, isn't it? This is one frustration that people are having, and that they're kind of like, they're calling it, splitting up the right, because what the mainstream media, what the left and what everyone has seemed to have done is lower the bar so much of what it means to be racist, fascist, even things with like the trans ideology. They've lowered the bar of what it means to be homophobic, transphobic, and all of these things, so that all of us, well, we're actually fairly centrist when you think about it on the things of, right and left and everything. And then you have the real far right, the ethno-nationalists, the proper racists, being lumped in with all of us, and it's allowing them to kind of sneak through and get all this influence, and it's frustrating.
Yeah, they haven't. So there are positives. Just to make sure I'm clear on this, there are great positives to the ethno nationalists, in my opinion, massive positives.
Oh, go ahead.
So the massive positive, because they've been saying get rid of them all, right? And people have been, because people can see how bad it's got, right? Get rid of them all, right? I'm like, let them keep saying that. Because all of a sudden you're getting black and brown people saying, and they've done it to me, they've come up and said, well, what about me? I said, but 5 years ago you would never have said that. Now you're saying, what about me, right? Before you wouldn't have said that. You allowed this to continue, this anti-white hatred.
Right, so you think it might be act as a wake-up call?
It's acting to make people that are decent, honourable people in this country of all colours realise there is something seriously wrong when people start saying, get rid of all of them.
Yeah.
Right? So that is a positive because it has changed the narrative.
Yeah.
And people are looking and saying, there's lots, don't get me wrong, there are people here that have been born here that I would definitely look at, and especially their criminal records, right? And the way they are in society, and say, well, you can go back where you come from, where your family come from. You're not wanted here, right? That's not a racial thing. I would do it to a Polish person. I'd do it to someone who come from Holland. I would do it from someone who come from France.
Yeah.
More likely France, to be honest.
So I'm just getting aware of time, but there's a few more things I want to ask you about what's going on with the court case at the moment. One of those things is, what have you been granted access to? Have you been granted access to seeing the tally papers or any CCTV footage, or is any of that going to be released at all? Or
no, there is no CCTV footage of the count. That's one of the reasons why the fraud itself. It allows that fraud to happen, right? So there's no CCTV images of the count itself. There is of the pre-count, which is where they work out. They count the amount of votes that have come in to give you the turnout.
Yeah.
And then they televise the actual return, where they tell you what the answer is. But the count itself is not allowed by law under the Official Secrets Act to be CCTV'd, and that's one of the reasons why they get away with fraud.
I was going to say, because I understand that it's like the same reason why they say, like, oh, even for journalism, there's absolutely no filming, no recording, audio or otherwise, in the courtroom and everything. But do you think that maybe if there was some kind of CCTV when the counting was happening, that once again the person overseeing it would have to be completely 100% trustworthy? But do you think that would kind of be the only way that we can assure this doesn't happen again?
So, in honesty, no.
Right.
It'd be a barrier because they think they just work out where...
They just go into a place that's not viewable.
So I had an issue at work once, this is going back 20 years ago, with my manager who was so abusive, he was about to get one on the chin. Right?
Right, bloody hell.
So all I said to him was, come over there in that stairwell and talk to me, right? And he went, I ain't going there. I said, because there's no cameras there, right? So all I'll do is pull people away from the cameras, right? So there's obviously no video evidence, right, of what you're about to say or do, right? That's exactly what they'll do. Yeah. Anytime you put things in provisions to stop people doing something, the human mind will work out, how can I do that without them actually knowing, right? Yeah. And they'll do it. My opinion is that we should pull the counters from a pool similar to jury service. Right. Right? As in jury service, it is your civic duty to sit on a jury, right? I believe we should use a similar system to bring them people in and say, right, we need 25 counters, we'll train you. It's not that difficult, is it, really, to count? You'd think it's not.
You shouldn't need too much training to count some bits of paper.
You're just counting the ballots and sorting them into pile, aren't you? Yeah. And that's all you've got to do. But I believe the only way that you could do that is that, and then you would get a fairer ballot system.
Yeah.
But undoubtedly the fraud. So let me just get back, because I think this is important. Sir Richard Morey, King's Counsel, who was an election petitions judge, right, emphasised the fraud with postal ballots.
Right.
Right. Again, I've already given you one of his quotes. He also said anyone who brings an election petition should be applauded for their courage, right? Because I'll tell you what, it's not easy, and it is a nightmare, and they can bankrupt me over this.
I was going to say, it sounds costly as well.
Oh, they're aiming to bankrupt me. There's other reasons why they shouldn't, including European Convention on Human Rights, which is Article 1.3, Article 6.1, and Article 13. So Richard Morey, King's Counsel, who was the election petitions, one of the election petitions judge in another case, and I'll get back onto that case because it is interesting. He actually highlighted postal voting as being completely crooked, right? But no one has ever put the actual count to the judges to say, listen, we've seen this happen. This is the first time it's ever happened, and it was me that was doing it. So it's been, the whole fraud has been explained to them in detail, right? And we'll get back, remind me about Doncaster, because it's really important. Once you go along them lines and you've declared what the fraud is, they have to act on it. Otherwise, we're not governed by consent. And if returning officers and their crooked mates, what I call organised political criminals, are appointing members of parliament, what you actually have is a Politburo.
Yeah.
Right? You're not governed by consent. And these people are crooks. There's another element to that. But getting back to Doncaster with the 5,000 votes, they stole them votes from the British National Party.
Oh yeah, you mentioned that. I mean, that seems like, even just besides the fact from, fraudulent election, that seems awfully controversial.
Well, so the BNP had five. So, by the way, this is the Labour Party that did that.
Yeah.
To defeat the English Democrats. So the English Democrats, if you go back 35 years ago, right? So English Democrats is run by Robin Tilbrook, and then we're the English Constitution Party. We're all about the rule of law. They stood in the election in Doncaster for the mayoral election, and their candidate won, right? So the English voted for the English. How dare they, right? That's what they did, right? The Labour Party didn't want that to happen, so they stole the votes, not from the English Democrats, but from the BNP. And they put a Labour vote at the top, a Labour vote at the bottom, and then stacked it with BNP votes. 5,000 votes, right? And they took them and they put them in the Labour pile, right? But they still couldn't beat the English Democrats.
Seriously?
They was massive, and it went to a second vote. But this is the crucial part that people don't understand. The returning officer was not crooked. He said, I want an individual ballot recount. I want every ballot re-looked at. And that's when they found the 5,000 votes in the Labour pile that were for the BNP. And it was to keep the English Democrats out of the elected.
And it still wasn't successful.
So Labour lost. But what I'm trying to say is it reinforces, people should understand that the red wall is not a real red wall.
Right.
It's a lie. And it's been created by Marxists. So everyone thinks we've got all this support. No, you haven't. You keep nicking everyone else's votes. It's as simple as that.
So what will be the first thing that you do once the final judgment is handed down? Depending on what it is, obviously.
Well, if we've won, I'll probably have a few beers. And then I'll contact you.
Yeah, and come on again.
And I'll come on and explain you what it is. So I don't hold out much hope for them voiding the election, which means scrapping it and saying start the whole thing again.
Yeah.
I don't hold out much hope for them saying there needs to be an individual ballot recount, right? Our whole purpose really was to get to this hearing,
Yeah.
right? So if you remember all of the hurdles, so 2 election petition hearing directions and strikeouts on the 12th of June, which we won to take the hearing forward. Again on the 14th or 15th of July to take the hearing forward, we won strongly in our favour. Appellant court hearing, which we won unanimously. Not a single judge was against us, and that's an unusual thing, really. So we won the appellant court. All of them said this hearing must go ahead, right? The point we always said was we need to put this information in front of 2 election court judges. Tell them there is a systemic fraud in this country because we are being taken over by communists and they are doing it. So one person said to me, you can vote your way in to a communist country, but you'll have to shoot your way out.
I was going to say, you can't vote your way out of it, though.
You would have to fight your way out. So again, what we're doing is expressing to people, and again, a lot of people said to me, they're establishment, they're this, that. I said, I don't care what they are. Whatever you think of them people, I have told them and put on record there is systemic fraud in this country. That is why the red wall exists through cheating. We are governed by consent. And if the judges allow this to continue, we now know we can look at them and say, you're part of the red wall, you're part of the cheating, you're part of the Soviet British system.
Yeah.
And it gives us further evidence that the only way you're going to deal with this is to void the Acts of Union of 1706, 1707 and go back to a full independent England, which goes, you then go back to local governance, that means the counties and the shires, and Parliament is just for England, and then you would have a Parliament for Scotland. By the way, Scotland hasn't got its own Parliament. It's got an assembly. It's got an EU assembly. The Scots have been lied to. The Northern Irish have been lied to. The Northern Irish are more English than the English. At least they'll stand up and defend their communities.
Yeah.
Again, I've done a seminar out in Northern Ireland. People really need to understand what is going on. And it is a communist, Marxist takeover of England. They need to destroy England.
Yeah. And when the judgment is handed down, will you be releasing a written recount of events, or do you see it being published anywhere else as a full recount? Because I mean, like we mentioned earlier, there's been little to no mainstream media coverage, and you said that when there has been, it's been misreported. So are you going to handle that yourself, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to go out on... There's only a handful of what I would describe as real alternative media, right? So this channel is one of them.
Oh, thank you.
Andy the Gabby Cabby, Sean Atwood, Mark Atwood...
Sonia Poulton. That's how I found out that there was hardly any mainstream media coverage. I was trying to find videos on this situation, and all that was coming up when I was typing in, fraudulent election or Graham Moore or anything like that was your videos, English Exit, Sonia Poulton, Andy the Gabby Cabby, and that was it. There was no mainstream media coverage whatsoever.
Sonia Poulton has been fantastic. I need to go back on her show. Iconic.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Charlotte Emma, she's fantastic. She's been covering it and looking at it, etc. But there's only a handful. So just to make sure I'm emphasising this correctly, I don't dislike certain people. So if I was to say, I don't know, Liam Tufts is his name, I think it is, right? He's shown no interest in it. Paul Thorpe, no interest in it. All these various people, they're British, right? They have been brainwashed to believe in something that isn't real, just like the Soviets were with the Soviet nationality. And they've got to understand that the corruption is at that level. And unless they deal with that, then they're going backwards.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on again. And I mean, when the final judgment is handed down, we'll have to get you on for episode 3, the final return, or well, hopefully not final return. But yeah, thank you so much for coming on again.
No problem. Thank you.